Craig Conroy sat down with The Athletic and gave us an inside look on what has been going on in the Flames front office.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me here today. Today, Nick is here, and we are going to talk, really the biggest storyline surrounding the Flames this season, I would say, and that is what's it down to now? 3 pending UFAs, and Nick, how are you doing?
I am getting to the point now where we're getting to the point where almost able to solely focus on hockey. We've only got a month or so of football left, and then hockey can consume basically all of my brain until about July when baseball really gets going. So we're getting there.
Yes. And today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. Get yours at jasemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON to get $20 off. And make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you're getting your podcasts and on YouTube as well. We're here for you Monday through Friday with all the latest updates and think pieces that we can give you here at Locked On Flames. Oh boy. Here we are. It is less than 2 months until the trade deadline, and we're still waiting.
Nobody wants to admit they're out of it yet.
No.
Everybody lives in denial is a river in Egypt, as the kids say. That's what we're operating on right now, because we all can look at the Flames and they've played a little bit better over the last few weeks. They played really well earlier in the week on Tuesday, the game they won. I imagine they'll look pretty good tonight playing a depleted team, but you need to be able to remove yourself enough from the situation to understand it's not just about right now. I think that's the biggest thing. That's my biggest takeaway, I would say, from reading that interview in The Athletic, is just how much of this is shaped by Conroy's career as a hockey player. And I think the fact he was in the league for so long, and, he was in the league 16 years. He made the playoffs 8 times. He only got further than the first round 3 times in those 16 years. I think there's a real appreciation for just how difficult it is to be good, and that just because you acquire good players doesn't necessarily mean that, 3 years from now they could blow it up entirely and make no real progress. They could be like the Ducks are right now. They could be what the Coyotes were for a while, what the Sabres were for a while, where sure, you can pick a bunch at the top of the draft, but if you're so bad for so long, it doesn't really matter. Eventually, at some point, eventually, if you don't start winning, it was all for nothing anyway. I mean, you think about how many GMs and coaches got fired in Buffalo until last year, and they didn't even make the playoffs last year. They were just decent last year.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, again, is that human element to it, too, because on multiple occasions throughout this article, he brought up it's not just about the players. Yeah. It is about their wives and their family, and you can't just, pick up these guys and drop them in a new city. You can on Cap Friendly and Armchair GM, but when it comes to the real life stuff, you can't, it's not that easy.
No, it's not that easy. And I think it's where we can really talk about how experiences fuel these ideas, because for the most part, you're going to find very differing schools of thought on the idea of totally blowing up a roster versus trying to maintain some base level of competitiveness. And I think that's largely going to be tied to your experiences. I think a lot of the people who are willing to go bottom of the barrel, strip the roster down to the studs, those have traditionally been new school guys, younger guys, people who haven't been in the game that long, because they look at it as a simple equation. The best chances of being successful are getting as many good players as possible. When you are a god-awful team, you are not going to be able to entice people to come to your team. So you need to pick at the top of the draft. So it is most beneficial to intentionally build a bad team. You look at what the Blackhawks did last year. That's the textbook definition of they're not tanking. The guys on that team are trying to win every game. They just assembled yeah, exactly. They assembled a roster so intentionally bad they wouldn't have a chance of winning. That's the difference versus a guy like Conroy, versus a guy like Lou Lamoriello, a guy like Jeff Gorton, guys who have been in hockey 20, 30 years. That's not how we do things in hockey. We have standards to uphold. We have decorum to uphold. If we're going to charge people to come to the game, we got to give them reasons to come anyway, which I think that I understand that line of thinking, but it frustrates me as somebody who knows there are more efficient paths to success. I think I understand the idea. And as somebody who, I'm 26 years old. I have not been in professional hockey for 30 years. I don't cling to tradition. I am looking for what is the quickest path to being better. Picking at the top of the draft, getting 2 or 3 of those types of guys to build around. And then once you're ready, strike. Do what the Leafs did. Once you get ready, you get your Marner, Nylander, Matthews. Okay, let's throw a boatload of money at John Tavares. Let's do what the Rangers did. Pick at the top of the draft a couple times. Let's throw a bunch of money at Panarin. That is the most efficient path to success if you are a reasonably sized market team, and you have the financial flexibility to go out. That's not the reality for every team. And I do think that's part of why the Flames aren't going to be doing that, is they know if they tear it down to the studs, even if they draft well, it's not going to be easy for them to entice a superstar to come join that young group.
No. And I think that Calgary 2-3 years ago was an incredibly attractive team for free agents. And, okay, maybe I do want to test the waters there. It's a smaller Canadian market, but they have guys like Gaudreau and Tkachuk that, make this a really competitive team. And what can I add to that? Right now, you got really nice national parks.
When you're thinking about this abstractly, the way I typically describe this to people when they ask me how I think about hockey, I think about it like any sport. I think about it like an academic subject. You study it as much as you can, and you try and understand what has worked the best in the past. I think a lot of people, especially in positions of power in hockey, are way too stuck on the ideas of 20 and 30 years ago, where you think about the other sports, you think about baseball, basketball, football, they are constantly trying to tinker around the edges, where even the most incremental small changes can make a significant difference. Whereas in hockey, a lot of these GMs, you think about it, Brad Treliving became general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, the most valuable franchise in the sport. And what was his big breakthrough about why they couldn't beat the Panthers? They weren't tough enough. So they went out and added Ryan Reeves, Tyler Bertuzzi, and Max Domi. Bertuzzi, useful player, upside, a little bit more talented than the other two, but I at least see the vision there. Domi and Reeves are entirely narrative-based signings. They are not giving you anything from a hockey perspective that is going to dramatically alter the results of your team for the better. But because of Brad Treliving's experiences in hockey, who his boss is, who his owners are, the market he works in, he has to do things that probably don't make a whole lot of sense, because he has to think about, well, if I do this, what does that say about this? And it gets so frustrating as a fan, because we all know better than this at this point. We have gotten past the point of baseline, well, analytics aren't, and every single team in professional sports has an analytics department. Some put more value in it than others, and there are more efficient ways of doing things. And that's the frustration, because it really does feel like the Flames are well on their way to wasting a second straight season with no real direction.
Yeah, and to kind of, I guess, pile onto that, in this interview, Conroy said, there have been rumors around this team since the day I started. And if you're going to run your team the way you might navigate the halls of a high school, you're not going to have much success. And, like Treliving went and signed those 3 guys and aren't or at least I know Ryan Reeves is banged up and out last time I checked.
Yeah, he hasn't played since November. Klinberg played, I want to say 2 weeks before he got pulled, and he hasn't come back and probably won't be coming back. Yeah, I understand, and this is where people lose me because they're always like, why are you complaining? I'm not complaining. I understand what these people are trying to do. It just doesn't make sense. That's the difference. Those people are unwilling to come at these situations, these problems from my perspective. I understand what Tree Living is trying to do. I understand what Conroy is trying to do. It is just not an efficient way of doing things. You only get so many cracks at this. You only live for so long. To waste 2 whole years of your franchise because you don't want to, you don't want to tear it down to the studs because you're worried about guys on the team. You know what? We're over. Well, we'll come back to this topic in the next segment. We're running over on time.
Coming up next, we are going to continue this conversation and put our general manager thinking caps on. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break here, and I'm going to tell you all about Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTI, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, and among others. This could really happen to any of us. We are in the thick of all these nasty colds and sinusitis, strep throat going around. You never know. You want to stay prepared. Visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It has never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off of your first purchase. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us on today's episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're getting your podcasts, so that way you never miss the latest and greatest updates on the Flames.
That's the goal, man. Make you a little bit smarter every day. That's the goal of doing content.
Yeah. I think that's why the show works so well with the two of us, because we both come at this from like a critical thinking angle rather than we're going to get on here and be Pat McAfee and Aaron Rodgers and just say whatever to pay the bill.
Yeah, we are academic people. We both wrote a lot of papers in college. We approach problems with, okay, this is the problem. This is what people have done in the past to solve said problem. Let me go and look at the evidence. Let me put together an argument and let me lay out the case. When you think about it like that, it becomes a lot less abstract. And I think that's where people get lost in the weeds a lot in sports, is they're trying to chase the things they can't touch. They're trying to chase the intangibles, the magic, the secret sauce, whatever. Everybody watches Miracle once and thinks the key to hockey is getting everybody to hate the coach and to rally them together. That only works every once in a while. The hothead evil coach only plays for so long. As Flames fans can attest to, that only has a very short shelf life. You cannot run a team that way for an extended period of time. And sometimes guys need the rah-rah coach. I'm not saying there isn't a place for the rah-rah coach in sports. It's an important component where every now and then you get a veteran group that's a little too comfortable, that thinks they're a little bit better than they are. They need that kick in the butt to kind of get them playing with a little more discipline, a little tighter. And sometimes that's necessary. But I think something I really took away from reading this is Conroy knows what it's like to be one of those guys on that team, that he is very conscious of. I don't want to just send these guys anywhere. I want to try and do what's right. Again, and the other thing I personally kind of was like, I like double taked reading was the line in there about, well, if I can make a trade that's good for both of us, that's fine with me. At the end of the day, man, I understand like politeness and respectfulness. And I know there's a running joke on Twitter that the new GM has to make a bad trade his first summer to kind of just get into the fraternity. Basically, it's like
Mhm.
paying your dues, that you have to make a bad trade to help somebody else out because you're the new guy. Basically, like, you know how they do rookie dinner where the rookie has to put their card down to pay for whatever everyone else orders. That's effectively what it read like, him saying
Yeah.
that I know people wanted me to get more for Toffoli, for Zadorov, but again, we're talking about this from a non-logic based perspective. We're talking about this tradition, which comes to emotions, which isn't, emotions are not the basis of rational action.
No, no, and I appreciate him wanting to be so kind and try to make everyone involved happy, but, like, I'm sorry, you could be working any job in the world, and you're never gonna make both sides happy. You're gonna be upset or the customer's gonna be upset. It's just impossible in every situation. So and especially to approach the trade deadline with that
I
mentality.
wouldn't say impossible, but very difficult. Continue.
I just to approach the trade deadline with this mentality, with the uncertainty of Noah Hanifin still, oh, I just feel like it's wasting time.
We know this. We've all known this. Until the Flames are willing to make a move, we know the absolute best case scenario for the Flames this year was being one of the two wild cards, playing a significantly better team in the first round. If you were to limp through the first round, you were definitely losing in the second round. It
Yeah.
is not worth burning an entire year for that. One thing in there that did register for me was the idea of, yeah, let's get Zadorov out of here. Let's get Toffoli out of here. That way we can incorporate Sharangovich or Peltier or Connor Zary. And that does have merit. That is something you and I have talked about a lot this season. The idea of part of this stagnation is nobody has anything to project onto. We don't have anything to be excited about
Yeah.
because this is a veteran team. Nobody's making dramatic leaps at 29, 30 years old, unless you're like Chris Kreider or Brock Nelson. But those are extreme outliers. That type of thing doesn't really happen. So getting Zary in there and him playing well and kind of entrenching himself in that in the top six, giving me the idea that, hey, on a good team, that's probably a second line wing. That is a useful player on a good team. Now it's incumbent upon the Flames to continue doing that as this season develops, where, okay, we're going to make another trade. Okay, let's get somebody else into the mix. I saw Peltier is back with the AHL team. He's getting
Mhm.
close to being ready to play hockey again. Hopefully he's back in a month or so. That's one more forward you can add to the mix to kind of project and hope on to. Hopefully we get some clarity on the goaltending situation where we can get Wolf up here consistently down the back half of the season, and he gets a good 10 to 15 starts over the final 30 games to really kind of set him up going into next year as the 1B to whoever the other goalie they have is. And that's really, if you are going to sell everybody, the fan base, on the future, you have to give them something to be optimistic about. The next 7 years of Jonathan Huberdeau, the next 6 years of Nazem Kadri will keep putting points up. It was good to see him get to the 600 point threshold. That's a really high bar. You got to play for a long time at a pretty high level.
Yeah.
But if Nazem Kadri is your best player, you're not winning anything. And that's no disrespect to Nazem Kadri, but it's a hard league to win in. We see a lot of teams with really good players not be able to get over the hump
Mhm.
because their best players just aren't better than the other team's best players. You think about you think about the Rangers teams of years past, you think about the Bruins teams of years past, you think about Vegas years past, Dallas, Colorado. All of these teams, you need as many cracks as you can to get into the playoffs. It is not the best team that wins. It is the team that makes the playoffs 8 times in 10 years and just gets the most chances to get hot. Until the Flames are consistently in the playoffs, and not every other year consistent, in the playoffs every year consistent, they're going to always be one of these fringe teams.
And that's yeah, no, and I feel like this has just been an ongoing conversation that we've had over the last, 3 years because there have been significant departures, but there hasn't been enough of a return, I guess, on like, they're signing good players, but there's just no return
There's no
on
juice.
there.
There's no excitement. There's no excess value.
Mhm.
You know, we can touch on that. That's a good idea. I'm writing that down. We'll talk about that next segment.
And coming up next, we are going to talk all about what gets fans going, what gets the team going, and what is missing from this formerly lackluster, or I guess they're still lackluster, roster of the Calgary Flames. But we are going to take a quick break here, and I'm going to tell you about the app that you might love and want to get in on. It is almost the halfway point of this season, Flames fans, and well, we still don't know what we're doing. And that's okay, because regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you can still win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for fantasy daily sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. Nick, who is a player you would take? Doesn't have to be on the Flames to win 100 times your money.
Brock Besser scoring a lot of goals.
All right. So yes, listen to Nick, and all you have to do is pick whether studs like Brock Besser, Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, or Nathan MacKinnon will score more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Flames fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us on today's episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at Jess Belmosto and at Nick Zararis. They don't have the juice. They don't have the sauce to get lost in.
That's what we've been talking about, this idea for a season and a half, that you got to give fans something to be excited about. I understand Conroy's prioritizing the emotional well-being of people on the team, which I can appreciate. They're trying to foster a good environment for the guys that are here, because in Conroy's mind, he thinks they're going to take a step back for a year or two, and over the next 24 months they are going to accumulate another 4 to 5 younger players who are going to slide in for Lindholm, for Tanev, for Hanifin, for Markstrom possibly, and that group is going to need an environment to grow into, because it's not about this group of veterans. It's not about Huberdeau. It's not about Weegar. It's not about Rasmus Anderson. It is about the Connor Zary. It is about the Dustin Wolf. Hopefully it's about the Oliver Chillington, those age group guys, the 24, 25, 26-year-olds, that mix of guys that 2 years from now, they will be in the positions that the Huberdeau, Kadri, Weegar are, and that group will get the auxiliary help. The problem with this idea is you're putting a lot of eggs in the basket of we're going to develop a team. It is really hard to draft effectively, develop those guys, and have the patience for it all to pan out. I mean, eventually you're going to need to push some chips in. And I understand the reticence to do that from a Flames perspective, because it's been hard for them to retain talent. But the Flames need to think about this really straightforward. You don't have enough good players. The best path to getting more players is trade or the draft. Okay, so we need to hoard all our draft picks, and we need to wait for a disgruntled star to become available. And then we need to have a good enough team that the disgruntled star wants to stay here once we lose our team control over him. This is a very difficult formula when you are one of these teams that doesn't have, the institutional strength of a Rangers, a Leafs, a Bruins, or a city like Vegas, or the tax benefits of Florida. So the Flames do have to get creative. I'm not ignorant of the fact that they're operating in a difficult situation, but eventually Conroy's got to think about this from a fan perspective of, so what are you selling me on? 3 years from now, we might be a playoff team? Like, that's not that's not going to cut it here. I hate to be the ungrateful, whiny fan, but if you're going to sell me on 2 years from now, we might be a playoff team, that's not a good pitch.
No. Okay, so you get the new arena in a possible playoff. I'm sorry, but why would I want to spend, I mean, I don't know how much season tickets are, but like thousands of dollars to go see this team just to poop on themselves 9 times out of 10, respectfully.
It is very, very frustrating to see this team so stuck because they lack the conviction to do something.
Yeah.
They have waited. They could have gotten more for all of these guys at the draft last year, at last year's deadline. We talk about this all the time. It's great you want to do right by the player. It's great you want to rate for the right move. You would have gotten more for 2 playoff runs of any of these guys than you would for 1 playoff run. You give a guy an extended period of time to settle into a new place, that helps them decide whether or not they're going to make that extension. I know that's really been the holdup for Lindholm, is that he only wants to get traded somewhere where the extension is agreed to upon him getting traded there. At some point, the Flames are going to have to make a decision here. They have been too accommodating of too many parties other than the team. Eventually, you got to do what's right for the team. And I'm not going to say the interview has me worried that Conroy is going to, wuss out and not trade these guys because he doesn't want to upset the room. But eventually, you got to give me signs of a direction. Like I just said a minute ago. If your plan is we're going to draft, we're going to get 9 draft picks in next year's draft. We're going to draft 2 guys in the first round. One of those guys will be ready to be on the team 2 years from now. You're putting a lot of eggs in your developmental basket, and the Flames have an okay track record of churning draft picks into roster players. But
how many times does it fail?
That's the thing. Like, I want to say it's something in the ballpark of 20% of first-round picks play over 200 NHL games. So you got a 1 in 5 hit rate, and you picked in the first round last year and the year before that and this year and maybe twice this year. They are putting a lot of eggs in trusting what's in-house when what's in-house has not done a lot to inspire a whole lot of confidence.
No. And you know how in college you get like the course survey at the end of the semester where it's just like, this is the best class I've ever taken. Like I would tell anyone to like take this professor, or, oh my God, fire this person, please. I feel like that's what should be going out to fans, either with like the season ticket packages or the ones that are consistently showing up through all of this, or ones that have told you straight up, I'm not spending any more money on this team until something changes.
And you'd be well within your rights. I talk about it all the time. Sports are a product because of the way the franchise system works in America. And this is a subject for the middle of summer when there's nothing to actually talk about. But the way sports work in America is so fundamentally different from Europe, where in Europe, the club is part of the community. The supporters buy into the club and they have a say in what goes on with their team. And the way sports work in America is where you hope your benevolent billionaire runs their team right. Whereas over in Europe, if you mess up over an extended period of time, they start, flipping cars and lighting torches. It is a vastly different culture. We should not have to feel like the owner is doing us a favor when he runs his team right. You don't have to be the owner of a professional sports team. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. Sell the team to somebody who will actually put the effort into improving the team.
Do yourself a favor.
Yeah.
Like at this point, I don't know. You gotta have like some sort of dignity and not want to be known as like go down as an ineffective ownership.
Especially because we know how all these billionaires operate, where the slightest slight against them is, I have to go on an 8,000 tweet tirade of over 1,200 characters per tweet anytime they're aggrieved in the slightest bit. So you would think, that at some point, hey man, my team makes the playoffs once every other year, and we haven't won more than one playoff series in the playoffs since George Bush was president, would be something to kind of ignite a fire in you to say, hey, man, maybe I'm not doing something right here.
No, you have to have self-awareness for that. And I don't think rich people have self-awareness, considering one of the many rich people.
The Flames have not won 2 playoff series in one playoff since 2004 when they went to the Stanley Cup final. They have only
literally 20 years ago.
They have made the second round and have not won in the second round since 2004.
Well, on that note, we'll let you sit in that, because that should tell you everything you need to know. And we will be back tomorrow with a great conversation about some hockey that's happening tonight at Mullet Arena. So have fun, be safe, stay warm, stay hydrated. I know it's absolutely freezing cold in Calgary, so bundle up. Don't go outside. Nick, do you have any parting words for us today?
Drink some water. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.